In the previous video, we talked about how you can very easily insert elements into a SQLite database. But so far, we haven't even tested, or at least in the previous video, we didn't test it. And even if we had tested it, there was no way in which we can immediately see that on the application because we haven't learned how to read. Now, before moving forward, let me just remind you that this is just a very tiny part that is covered inside of my full WPF Masterclass course that I have on Udemy, and for which there is a link somewhere in this video on YouTube or on LinkedIn or anywhere, and that you can feel free to check out. And if that is something that you may be interested on, I'll make sure to include a very good discount for you. But anyway, you're here to learn how to read elements from a SQLite database. So in the other video I mentioned that we'll learn how to easily insert into the table by creating a connection, a SQLite connection, making sure that the table exists. I mentioned that even if the createTable method is called more than once, this doesn't mean that a previous version of the table gets deleted and a new one is created. If there is already one table, this is the one that is going to be used and the creation is ignored. And we are just inserting. I also mentioned how it is a very good practice to use this using statement. So whenever the using statement ends, the connection is closed, it's dismissed. Because there can only be one connection at a time. If you didn't use a using statement, you would have to call the close method from the connection. But now that we have inserted then, I am going to, from another page in my case, going to be reading from the database, and it's going to be just as straightforward as before. Right here in this main window, I have a read database method. And this read database method is going to be read in two scenarios. It is going to be called right in the constructor for the main window, so I know that as soon as the window gets created, I am reading from the database. But in this case, it is also being called right after showing a window as a dialog. If you are not familiar with this in WPF, this just means that I am going to be showing this window, but as long as that other window is displayed, I will not be able to navigate back to this one. And because of this, I know that as soon as the other window closes, let's just say that the show dialog method finishes its execution and the next line is going to be executed, in this case the read database. Basically what this means is that as soon as I navigate back to the main window, I want to read the database again to update any new element, any new contact in this case that may have been added from the new contact window. From the read database is from where the interesting things happen. And as you can see, we have something very similar to what we had before. In this case, I am creating a new connection, a new SQLite connection, exactly in the same way, by creating an instance that receives the database path that already exists inside of the app class. Remember that the database path is a static variable that we can access without having to access an instance of the app class. Inside of this using statement, I am also creating the table in case it doesn't exist, because if I wanted to read or insert or update for that matter from a table that doesn't exist, well, there would be exceptions. So I just make sure that the table exists. And to read from this database, all I have to do is call the table method. There is a generic table method, so I can pass which table I want to read, in this case the contact table. And I will have to call the toList method. The toList method is an extension method that I have access to because I have added this using directive to the system.link namespace. And what this method does is get that table, that query to the table, and transform it, read it as a list of contacts. All I'm doing here is also ordering it by name, so I have it alphabetically ordered. All I have to do is to pass this name as a property that I'm going to use to order these elements and call the toList again. Eventually, I will have all of those contacts inside of this contacts variable. And all I'm doing to be able to show this is to a list view that I already have defined inside of my UI. This is not about defining a list view, just about reading from the SQLite. But basically, I just defined a list view to which I can assign the source of the items that are going to be displayed. And that source is precisely going to be that variable to which I assign those elements that have been read and ordered from the contact table. So as you can see, again, this is very straightforward. By simply creating this SQLite connection, I am able to call the table method, or in the case of inserting elements, the insert method. There are also update and delete methods in case you needed them. So let's go ahead and test this out, and you may notice that my application has a few more things here and there that I have not explained, but this can be adapted to any application. The previous lecture was about inserting into the database. This one is about reading. So I have here the new contact method, that is the one that opens the new contact window. And notice how I cannot navigate back because this is a dialog. And let's just write my name here. I don't really remember which one was for which, if this was for the phone number and this was for the email, I don't really remember, but let's say there were. Let's click on save. The window closes and immediately the read database method is called again, and I have here that information that I have just written down. So there you have it. We have learned how to read and how to insert, in the case of the previous video, from and to a SQLite database with WPF.